if your employees are more occupied with fighting each other than actually competing in the market, then you have a problem. I always found it incredibly confusing when in my mid-20s I entered into kind of the business, the private sector world, after working in high-stakes NGOs environments and natural disaster response. When I moved into private sector, how people were more concerned fighting each other every single day and making sure that their colleagues and employees would not get the upper hand over them and sabotaging their success, instead of actually being focused on the core purpose, the mission, and outcompeting the market, competing with competitors, competing with other companies. But instead, it was all about, I compete with this colleague because he could snatch away my promotion, or that person shines too brightly. I need to make sure that doesn't take away my spotlight. It always seemed nuts to me, like completely psychotic, and I couldn't understand why that was so widespread. Over the years, I found that in many different organizational structures, and it is more common than you think. People show up to work every single day, more concerned with fighting their colleagues, with getting the upper hand, with playing zero-sum games, than actually competing with the market and bringing the company to success. So it gave me a lot of reason to reflect and to kind of dissect why does this happen. What are the underlying mechanisms and dynamics? And how can you actually turn this around to create environments where purpose is first, where people work together towards a shared mission, where the stakes are high, where the outcomes are clear, the expectations are clear, and where politics almost becomes the least viable option and shunned because it just, in that setting, doesn't create any good results and outcomes. So what are the environments in which politics creates supposedly good outcomes? Like, why would the players in the game, why would employees and leaders opt for politics? Politics meaning being more concerned about perception, optics, looking good, than actually performance and making sure that other people do not look as good. Why would they sabotage the success of their colleagues? Why would they try to undermine what their team members are doing? And so the first reason is often a lack of clear structures. Weak or unclear structures create vacuums. It's not clear what the expectations are by the top management. It's not clear what is rewarded, and it's not clear what is being punished. And sometimes there is not even any thought about this anyway in the organization. There's just some vague ideas around this. And then it's just being treated on a case-by-case basis. So people learn that, okay, I'm not really being held accountable for bad behaviors, so why not? On the other hand, it's also not really clear what is rewarded and what gets me ahead. So I might as well just maximize my own advantage by trying to look good, to stand out. And that obviously means I need to make sure that other people do not look as good. And what happens is that that now we create a world of optics, that people think, okay, it is the external validation. It is, if I'm looking good, this will get me ahead. Because there is no clarity around what the actual reward and punishment structure is. Like, what are behaviors in this company that can get me fired? If I sell unethically for 6 months in a row, I have a 60% refund rate at the end of each month, but still I have brought in theoretical paper value of revenue, again, of customers who never paid, but everybody celebrates them for it. I'm being invited to the CEO to have lunch with them. I guess what I'm doing cannot be that bad. And I probably don't get away with this behavior in another company, so I might as well carve out my little niche here and build my little nest. And if I'm a leader, I start building my army of yes men, of toy soldiers who basically do and say what I want them to do and say, right? It's a comfortable place to be in. And if I can be in good graces with the CEO, if the CEO always only cares about surface perceptions, we might as well make sure that I stay a bit longer during the company events, that I see if I can play golf with them on the weekend, and just find some shared hobbies. I can spend comfortable the next 10 to 15 years in that environment. And why not? At least, the environment is conducive to it. The environment allows me to do this. So what then happens is you find these traditional only by virtue of nobody not having been disrupted yet by the market, but you find those companies that have been so long in that mode, and it happens more often than you think, that now you have small fiefdoms within the organization that are led by small little tyrants who create their own army of loyalists. And the problem with all of this is it creates a culture of conformity. So if you're not actually facing new market environments, if the dynamics shift and you need to react quickly, or new risks emerge in that environment, who will tell you? None of your toy soldiers will come up to you and tell you, hey, we have a problem here. I just spoke with somebody at an industry event and they say there's going to be this new regulation in a few months. And actually, because we have always been acting so unethically, this can really hurt us because now there are really big fines for this type of behavior. Who wants to be the messenger? The messenger always gets shot first in a political environment. Truth is not really welcomed and rewarded. So everybody will just keep silent and pass on the buck to somebody else. In the end of the day, it's the CEO and the top management that will be blindsided until it's too late, forcing them into reactivity after reputational harm, after potentially financial fallouts, and paying the fines in this regard because nobody told them, because nobody was, that information didn't travel through a conformist hierarchy. And so what often happens here is that new high performers come in because sometimes they're attracted to the big brand name, or if it's generally a well-known company or well-known organization, and they will of course be in there. They want to move things around. They have new ideas. You see this also in the education sector often. Young teachers, they have new ideas. They want to do things differently. They want to bring in a fresh flavor. And it doesn't take even a couple of months until their spirits are being crushed. They're being put in their place. If they don't play ball, they're being ostracized. And if they don't conform to the doctrine, to the dogma of the insecure, mediocre, incompetent fiefdom leaders and tyrants, then they're on their way out, or their life will be miserable. So what often happens in those companies is a daily self-preservation, daily survival mode, and employees will try to make sure that they never get into the crosshairs of a leader, or don't make their own leaders feel insecure. Because if their own leaders would feel insecure, or feel that they could be outshined, they will of course do everything in their power to put them back into their place. So weak structures, lack of expectations, right? Lack of leadership ultimately creates that vacuum in which all these malpractices flourish, in which all of this toxicity brews and stews. And the next level is really about the stakes as well. And you see this often when overhiring has been the norm. If there is not really a high stakes environment, like in crisis response, like in contexts where it really matters, if there is no high stakes environment, if it's just like going from day to day and the company is pretty settled and we're not talking about margin improvements of 1 or 2%, then it almost feels like many employees are nothing but decorations. They're filling their number on a spreadsheet that the investors want to see. How many people do you have in the marketing department? How many people in the product department? How many office managers do you have? Why didn't you have an office manager there? It often becomes less relevant about what those people actually do and if they produce value, but more about just having somebody filling a seat. And now obviously, if you come to work every day, you're not being challenged, there is no real challenge for you, you start turning inwards. And if you wanted to create those challenges, but your leader puts you down, puts you back in a place because they don't want more work, they don't want to be seen as, oh, there's a new market opportunity. Now the boss tells them to actually pursue that marketing opportunity. There's a lot of work. If I can just skirt around that, why not? And so you then bring in, especially in overhiring scenarios, you bring in a lot of people who then show up to work, don't have a real job, don't have real tasks to do other than administrative, basically keeping ongoing things just ongoing on low flame. That obviously creates also a lot of space for politics, because people know that what they're doing is not creating value. They know that they have job insecurity due to this. They know that if they would be exposed, and if somebody would come in and actually look at those things, look at what they're actually doing, they could lose their job. That's very uncomfortable. Why would you give up this comfortable position? And so what then happens is that those employees sometimes just create their own little dramas and create their own little fights and arguments and dynamics, because they create some sort of excitement in the workplace. And ultimately, the biggest loss for the company is that people who could be highly motivated, who could be focused on the market, who could be focused on the craft, who could be upskilling, who could be motivated, are now more concerned with filling their days with politics, with fighting each other, when the entire energy of the organization turns inward into chaos, turns inward into friction, into strife, instead of this energy being channeled outside into the market and becoming market leaders, becoming more competitive, becoming more innovative. And ultimately, it is on managers, it's on the top management, it's a decision. It's ultimately a choice that needs to be made, and the choice can also be no. We do not want to change this, and there are good reasons to keep things the way they are. Could be shareholder expectations, could be risk aversion. That's a fair point. But if there is an ambition to create a high-performing company, a high-performing organization, to create an environment in which good people can thrive, to create an environment in which people are fired up, in which they bring in motivation and they want to be market leaders and want to gain the competitive advantage, then of course there needs to be a course correction. And that either means to pivot the company into more high-stakes environments, or it also means clarifying the mission, clarifying the purpose. It also often means removing leaders and basically having a closer look into actual high performers and promoting them to become leaders instead of the mediocre nest builders. It also requires an entire revamp of these nests, or an uprooting of those nests. Like, people, as painful as it is, who have been counting on the next 10 to 15 years to build their nest at the expense of everybody else's career, they need to be uprooted. It can be painful. And honestly, it's a shame for the company in the first place to create an environment where this was even possible, where this was even an option. And because you have now made people feel comfortable with a very dysfunctional way of showing up to work, and you tolerated it and you allowed it, and you did do them more harm than good by doing this, by being so lenient about those malpractices. You didn't do them a favor. In the short term, you may have avoided conflict, but in the long term and midterm, literally screwed them over. They become unemployable in other companies. I mean, if your main skill is to build nests and to boot out competitors and to be basically a corporate politician, who wants that? Who needs that? Nobody. That only works in that environment in which you grew this thing, in which you grew this dynamic. But that's not transferable. Like, nobody wants an outsider to come in and do these things. Sometimes, again, happens automatically, organically inside of a company, and then it's kind of hard to uproot. But it makes the person unemployable for other roles, because there was no skill development. And so politics also come from the tone that is being set by the leadership itself, of course. And I think for a lot of leaders, it also means to do some soul searching. How did you actually promote your current leaders? Was it because you liked them? Was it because they were the ones who stayed the longest at company events? Was it because they always said yes to you? Did you also promote people who disagreed with you and who had better idea? Did you actually give them the leeway to try out that idea, that approach? Did you also promote people who were highly competent, who maybe you didn't feel always comfortable with, but they are highly competent, they know what they're doing. You just gave them the autonomy to do what they need to do. Like, the question is really, by you promoting people or demoting or firing people, every single time you did set the tone for the entire organization, what the organization would be like. If it would be a political place, or if it would be a place based on performance, if it would be a place based on value generation, if it would be a place where people are focused on the long-term gain, or people are focused on ruthless competition and gaining short-term gains by screwing each other over. Ultimately, as a leader, it starts with you, because you're the one who makes those decisions that trickle down to everybody else. You design the incentive systems. You take the financial decisions. You take the decisions on who should be part of this organization and who should not be. And you're also the one who can implement expectations and punishments if there are severe transgressions. If you have never exercised that, if those people who've held back your company, if they have never faced any consequences for it, and you just let it simmer there, you just allow it to be, well, then it will be very hard to now turn the boat around. It will take shock therapy. Because the only alternative to this is you bring in good people, they're mediocre managers and fiefdom, fiefdom leaders will just crush their spirit, will kind of turn them into conformist yes men or spit them out of the organization again. And you just end up with ultimately a dysfunctional, fragile organization over time. Again, every malpractice always works in the short term, sometimes even in the midterm, and it can go well for a while. There's no doubt about it. But there will be a moment of reckoning. If the company, if the organization is not set up to deal with disruption, to deal with massive changes, which will inevitably come, inevitably at some point. And if it doesn't have good people who are really motivated, who really care, who really have skills, but instead you only have a whole bunch of politicians who know how to take you out for dinner, you can't win in your market. Of course, exceptions aside, you have a monopoly. Exceptions aside, you have unique relationships in the industry. These are exceptions, of course. But if you are a competitive company, then you won't. So politics and then allowing an environment of office politics is not really in the interest of any company that truly wants to win and that wants to be a market leader and that wants to have the competitive edge in the industry.